Welcome to the astrological forecast with Planetary Calendar for March 2017. We're Ralph and Lonnie Dimitrius, your astrologers. So, Lonnie, what does the calendar say about March?
Well, let me read you Ralph's brilliant forecast if you don't have the calendar for yourself. This month's forecast: a high-frequency conjunction between Sun and spiritual Neptune on the 1st promotes intuition, inspiration, and spiritual connectedness. On the 4th, expect short-term turbulence as Venus turns retrograde until mid-April, making us aware of love, beauty, and our unique natures. Another speed bump on the 9th as Mars storms into Taurus, but he settles down quickly, so plant your garden and enjoy nature. A rambunctious full moon on the 12th, thanks to a loose cardinal T-square and a stubborn Mars, brings disruption to the external world. Use your spiritual tools, don't watch the news, and the storms will pass you by. Jupiter moves away from the beneficial star Spica, widening the sextile with Saturn that has provided such comforting financial stability, so expect economic disruptions and disconnects. It will be evident on the international scene as countries where natural resources are their main income will suffer from lack of demand and suppressed prices. On the 13th, Mercury enters single-minded Aries, a precursor to the upcoming spring. So put into words those ideas swirling around in your head, and then use that Mars and Taurus to make practical progress towards your goals. On the 20th, spring begins with a stellium in Aries, including Venus close to the Sun. This is a high-energy season, but with a great deal of charm, and a desire for connection, pleasure, and romance. The new moon on the 27th empowers the self, creativity, and initiative. Use it well. On the 31st, Mercury slowly enters Taurus, so be patient with people. It's not them, it's the stars.
It's a very interesting month ahead, isn't it?
You have such a way with words when you're talking about the planets and the stars, right?
It's true, it's true. Now, there's certain days to watch out for, okay, and we've marked them on the calendar with letters. The first is that conjunction with the Sun and Neptune. That's a big one. Remember, Neptune's one of the biggest planets in the solar system, so when the Sun is at the same degree, people feel it, and Neptune's a very spiritual, deeply intuitive influence. The next is on the 4th, and on the 4th, what do we say about the 4th? That's the short-term turbulence, because Venus is going to go retrograde, which means she backs up. And so whenever a planet changes direction like this, you feel it. It just gets disruptive for a day. So watch out for the 4th. And what Lonnie was saying is very true. When Venus goes retrograde, it's actually a great position for Venus. You know, Mercury, when it goes retrograde, everyone complains. But when Venus goes retrograde, no one complains.
Venus doesn't mind if she doesn't have to be somewhere at a certain time. She likes to kick back,
right,
chill out. So she doesn't mind being retrograde. The ones that mind the most being retrograde are things like Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, the things that are kind of externalizing their energy. But Venus, she chills out.
Yeah, you kind of internalize that love energy. Now, on the 9th, watch out. That's when Mars enters Taurus, or we said storms into Taurus. Now, Mars has been coming out of Aries, and Aries, Mars really likes. When he goes into Taurus, Taurus is more stubborn. When Mars changes sign, you will feel it. So right the day before the 9th and the day after, sometimes you'll feel that turbulence. People just get a little rammy.
Well, and Mars has been in Aries, which it rules.
Yes.
And it's like that kid just running, you know, and then Taurus kind of slows it down a little bit to stop and smell the roses, which Mars can do, but, you know, it's not his favorite thing to do. It's more a Venus thing to do, so.
Exactly. And on the 12th is a very busy day. This is the full moon, okay? It's also when daylight time begins in the U.S., especially out here on the West Coast, and the calendar, you know, was calculated for the West Coast. There's a void, of course, in the course of the day, and it's just kind of we could describe it as rambunctious for a reason.
Well, and Mercury is square Saturn, you'll see on the calendar as well, and that kind of is like the kid at odds with his dad, you know, it's kind of like, you know, it's can we go play? No, there's work to be done kind of a thing. So you feel that disconnect within yourself, even if there's not somebody standing over your shoulder tapping their toes saying, get this done.
And then just to like kick things up a notch, on the next day, the 13th, Mercury enters Aries. Now, Mercury has come out of Pisces, which is not a strong position for Mercury. It's a little wishy-washy. When it gets to Aries, it really is that kid pulling his parent along. And so over these couple of days, you will notice a lot of disruption. But it really is a chance, though, when Mercury enters Aries, the idea that, a faint heart never won a fair lady. You have to be able to speak up. And Mercury in Aries really helps people to speak up.
Well, and it also helps to activate things. In Mercury in Pisces is all in your head. Then these thoughts, these ideas, these actions, the ideas in speech are precursors to action. So the natural progress means that things will actually start moving forward. At least you'll be talking about them and getting the word out there. So.
Exactly. And then the coming 18th, we have marked as a white circle day. What that means is that everything is going along really smoothly. So if you're planning on a great party for that month, do it on the 18th.
Well, it means that if something's in your way to block you from doing something, it's not the planets.
Right.
It's something else. It's you.
Exactly.
So at least you've got a clear path and not a lot of adverse influences to keep you from your goals.
Now, to go back to the 13th for a second, watch out for arguments. If you go out to work someplace, remember, more heart attacks take place on Monday mornings, basically because people kind of hate going to work. Watch out for arguments first thing on a Monday morning because of that Mercury going to Aries. Just a little heads up about that. The following Monday is real interesting because that's the first day of spring. The spring equinox, the first day of Aries. It's a lively one.
You'll see it on the calendars for the 21st because they usually record it on the first full day, but the actual timing of it is on the 20th.
And we describe in the calendar, in the forecast, that there is a stellium there. What that means is a cluster of planets, maybe the sun and the moon, are all close together in the same sign. When a person has this in their chart, for instance, it tends to make a real focus of that part of the personality. But a stellium in Aries means there's a lot of energy. And remember, Mercury moved into Aries a week before, so that's the little kid running out ahead and saying, hey, 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 let's go. And now everyone else is saying, sure, why not? So we really are going to be bursting upon the scene with this springtime.
Hey, thank goodness Mars left and went into Taurus, right?
Exactly. And then as we get into the next week, it's fascinating. You get to the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th, which is the new moon. We have 3 days in a row, which are all white circle days on our calendar. And what that means is that these are just smooth sailing. It means that there's no negative aspects or difficult aspects going on.
Even the 29th is another white circle day. So
exactly.
There's a whole period of, things sliding in grease grooves, so to speak. So look forward to that being a little bit of a time when you can enact some of the plans.
You can glide too.
Easily.
You can coast if you wanted to. But it really is a great time for getting things done because one of the things that comes up there on the Sunday, and remember that these aspects will go on a couple days before, a couple days after. We're just showing them when they're taking place exactly, is the Mercury conjunct Uranus. Mercury is mental communication. Uranus has to do with transformation for positive reasons. When Mercury gets close to Uranus, it creates brilliance. So when you have people who have this in their chart, for instance, many times they just have they're brilliant.
Flashes of
genius.
Ideas and genius, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a great time for really scintillating conversation, new ideas, new projects on that Sunday. And you'll find that any place you go, any discussions and socializing will really be heightened at that time. And then I think the final thing for the month is the H on the 31st. And that's when Mercury enters Taurus. As we said, things will tend to slow down. Remember, it's not them, it's the stars.
Hi, it's time for another segment of Planetary Calendar with your astrologers, Ralph and Lonnie D'Amicis. One of the best perks about us writing and doing the astrology for an astrological calendar is that we have one with us all the time. Yes. I have a purse size in my purse. We have one on the wall so that we can consult it all the time. And so it gives us a lot of insight about how the planets are moving and affecting us and everything like that. And so it also gives us a lot of joy to be able to share that with other people, because a lot of times people don't know what's going on out there. And if they have the handy dandy calendar,
It's a lot easier.
they know. But sometimes it's a little tricky trying to figure out how to use all this information, because there's so much packed in here. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about how to use an astrological calendar of any kind.
Exactly. Now, when you're looking at a calendar, astrology has its own language. It has the symbols for the planets. It has the symbols for the geometric relationships between the planets, which are
Called
called
aspects.
little triangles and little squares and things like that. And the most obvious ones, of course, is the crescent moon. And that shows up on any astrological calendar. And when you use a calendar, it's really one of the first things you want to look for, is look for where is the moon.
And you know, that would be useful enough information just to know whether or not the moon is in a sign that is harmonious with your sign or not.
Right.
Or if it's a moon that's kind of an industrious moon, or I would rather stay in bed all day and eat chocolates kind of moon. And so it's kind of nice to just know that that moon every 2.5 days is in a new sign, and you get to realize where you're going to find your sort of comfort moon. You know, I mean, I get a lot of work done when there's a Capricorn moon. You know, a lot of times people say, oh, Capricorn moons can make you feel like a little emotionally stiff, but I get a lot of work done. So that makes me feel good, you know.
Exactly. And one of the things you want to look at first is, where is the new moon, and where is the full moon, and where is the next new moon? Because this is the big cycle. And realize that years ago, before we had electricity in our houses, this was a big thing for people, because when they went out in the evening, whether or not there was a moon up or not had a lot to do with how far they could travel. It's a lot easier to go for a walk from your house to another person's house during a full moon than during the new moon, when it's pitch black out. So you look for the new moon and you look for the full moon. And typically the calendar will say the new moon and the full moon. Now, here's the cool thing is, you look at the new moon and you realize it's about 2 weeks until the full moon. And then you count about 3 days after that full moon, and you're in the sweet spot. This is the point when the sun and the moon are trine to each other 120 degrees apart after the full moon. So the cycle has really built up, reached its peak, balanced on edge during the full moon, and then it gets there and it goes, whew, and it shares. This is called the expressive part of the moon. And it's a great time if you're working on a project and you need it to come to completion or presentation, to aim for that spot. Now, it's not enough just to know where the moon is. You also want to know what the sign is. Okay? Why? It affects you personally. This is where it gets to you personally.
Well, and the moon, even people who have just a little passing knowledge of astrology know that the moon is related to your emotional nature.
Right.
And so we also see it being related to water with the ebb and flow of the tides on the earth. You can see this pull that the moon has as it does its dance around the earth. And so it also pulls on our emotional water, you know, tears and emotionality is also associated with water. So when you have that relationship, when you know where the moon is, you know what kind of emotions that might bring up in you.
Exactly. And in a practical sense, you will find, if you looked at the astrological charts of people close to you, that some of the people who you get along the best with are people who have the moon in the same sign as your sun. Remember, the moon is a reflection, and it means that they emotionally reflect who you are on kind of your deepest, most spiritual level.
You can also find that sometimes you have that relationship with people who share a moon rising connection.
Exactly.
You know, I have a Capricorn rising. I tend to have a lot of Capricorn friends because we relate easily together, and they feel comfortable in the way I present myself as a Capricorn. It's almost like, you know, I'm like the honorary Capricorn in the group, you know.
Exactly.
But, you know, so if you know a little bit about each sign, you know, Aries, of course, is kind of the newborn energy, the wake up, the salesman, the, you know, encounter the new day kind of energy. And Taurus is kind of a steady, steadfast, kind of
The banker.
dependable, hardworking, but they know how to relax and enjoy themselves and a good meal. And so when you understand the energies of all the signs, then you can see, oh, this is why I relate to this person, even though we're not the same sun sign, they might have that moon or they might have that rising.
Exactly. So for instance, if you're born in Leo and you know your symbol and you see on the calendar that on those days the moon is going to be in Leo, you are going to feel more emotionally supported during those days. Now, if you know, for instance, that opposite Leo is the sign of Aquarius, you'll know that when the moon is in Aquarius, you may feel a little challenged because it's pushing against that essential self of yours, saying, well, you know, who are you and what are you doing? It's not quite as nurturing. So that's a good thing to be aware of as well.
And we can take that a little step further because on our particular calendar, we place the symbol of the ruling planet of a sign above the number if it's in a harmonious relationship with the moon. Right. So we're talking about the moon and how the moon gets along with signs. That little glyph, that symbol above the number says, okay, if we've got Saturn above the number and the moon is in a sign, we say Saturn is in a harmonious aspect with the moon in whatever sign that is. Now, Saturn is important not just because it's an important planet, and you don't want to say anything bad about Saturn, but Saturn, we go by rulerships of the signs. And we use the ancient traditional rulerships, not the modern rulerships. And in that system, which worked for so many thousands of years, we thought, why change that? As most professional astrologers do agree with that traditional rulership. So each sign is ruled by, each planet rules two signs. So Mercury would be the ruler of Virgo and Gemini. Venus, the next planet, would be the ruler of Taurus and Libra. Mars would be the ruler of Aries and Scorpio.
Right.
Jupiter
is the ruler of Sagittarius and Pisces. Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn and Aquarius. And in fact, right inside the front of the planetary calendar is all the rulerships.
This little chart.
It's a very widely known system.
Now, so you notice that we've hit every sign except for Cancer and Leo. I'm sorry, because Cancer is ruled by the moon.
And Leo's by the sun.
And Leo is ruled by the sun. So now we've covered all the signs with rulerships. So if you see that the glyph or the symbol for Saturn, which in the case of Saturn, it's like a lowercase h with a little hat across it, a little cross T on the top of it. If that's above the number, that means that Saturn is in a harmonious relationship with the moon and the sign that the moon is for that day. So if you're a Saturn-ruled person, either born in Aquarius or in Capricorn, or if you have strong Aquarius or Capricorn in your chart, even you could be a Sagittarius sun, but you could have 3 planets in Capricorn. Right. This would be a day that would be emotionally supportive for you because the moon is in a harmonious sign.
Exactly. And it's really not that hard to remember these things, especially because most of the time you only have to remember for yourself and maybe your significant other. You don't have to remember for everybody. You know, most people know their own astrological signs, and they know the astrological signs of their spouse. And then figuring out which planet you relate to is relatively simple. You know, a long time ago in literature, even just 100, 150 years ago, planetary language was very common in how people wrote. People would talk about being Jove-like, you know.
Jovial.
Jovial. Well, it meant they were like Jupiter, and they had a mercurial wit. It meant that it was like Mercury, you know, a Venusian actress. I mean, an Aphrodite. This was a very common part of how people described personality types. And it, you know, just because we've moved into much greater technology, people have not changed that much in some ways. We still are fundamentally human, and we are created from the same stardust as everybody else.
Well, and of course, we still live on the same planet. We
Yep.
still have all these planets in our neighborhood. I mean, that's really what the solar system is. It's our little neighborhood in the Milky Way galaxy. And these planets relate to each other. Not only do they relate to each other, but they send each other information back and forth. And so sometimes they do it in a nice way. It's like having a big family, you know.
Yes.
Some people you get along with really well, other ones not so much, And so sometimes you have people in your family who are going through a phase where they're just a little more lovable or
Yes.
they're a little less lovable. And so that's what happens with these planets as they move through different signs and make different aspects to the other planets. And these signals are either harmonious and supportive or they're not. Yet we also talk about the fact that you can have tools through this understanding of planets in general and then the way they work in your own chart. You can develop tools to even make some of that disruptive energy work in your favor.
Sometimes all it is a sign to you that you need to work on that. In other words, one of these constructive energies that can be very challenging is called a square. It's when the planets are 90 degrees away from each other. So for instance, if one planet was in Capricorn and another planet was in Aries, they're 90 degrees to each other. Okay, they're both cardinal signs. And so they can butt heads. One's the sea goat and one's the ram, and they can really butt heads. Sometimes it's a sign to you that if you're seeing this aspect go on and you're running into a little head banging with people, that maybe you need to work on this and you need to find ways in which you can understand what is driving them and what is driving you and how can you be constructive together.
And to make that even more personal, if you are the Capricorn, maybe it's that Aries person who's either a coworker or somebody in your family. And of course, you have to figure out a way to get along with them and have a better understanding of them. And this is a time where you can see those energies manifesting out in the exterior world and get some ideas about some clues how you can internalize that and maybe make that relationship a little easier for you long term.
Right, and more productive. For instance, Capricorn likes to work on stuff hard and they like to work on it long term. Aries tends to be more impetuous but very energetic. Well, maybe this is the chance for the Capricornian person to say, well, I'm going to use that energetic Aries as energy. And the Aries can say, I'm going to use the wisdom that comes from Capricorn from planning long term so that we can accomplish more together.
And then the understanding part comes out of the fact that the Capricorn should only give the Aries short-term things to do because they're going to lose their enthusiasm for it rather quickly and then give them something new to challenge them.
Exactly. And the Aries should get the Capricorn to come along on meetings so they're taken seriously.
Well, it's very interesting. There's a whole area of astrology called mundane astrology that has to do with sort of the mundane, everyday things of life. And a lot of people say it's mostly applicable to business and business situations, the stock market and things like that.
Governments.
But it really also has a component where some companies who are not very vocal about this, definitely there are many who are decidedly quiet about it, but they have an astrologer, maybe looks at an astrological chart of a potential employee to see if they're a good fit, whether or not the way that their energy kind of manifests in their chart is something that can be productive for the job that they want to hire them for.
Exactly.
There's so much talk about job discrimination on all these other fronts and things like that. I halfway see a picket line with Scorpios, saying, why don't you hire me kind of a thing. But it's just an interesting way that you can get an insight into people and personalities and methods of operating that you wouldn't necessarily see. And in our work as herbalists, I do the same thing with blood type, because each blood type has a distinct sort of personality and sort of mode of physicality that they can't control. I mean, it's hardwired in, and so just having this understanding is helpful.
Exactly, and actually in our work as astrologers, many times we'll work with clients to help them find their best possible work. their right livelihood, so that they're working in an area that allows them to use their genius. Every person has a native genius. Some people have multiple, but every person has a native genius of their personality. And in life, one of the great joys is being able to use that. And the thing about astrology is, in a time when we're talking about, do people greet diversity and celebrate diversity? Well, no one celebrates diversity like an astrologer. Because we recognize that every single chart, even twins, have different charts that show the diversity of their personality, their unique qualities. And some of our most wonderful work has been with people, helping them understand really who they are, so that rather than being pushed in a particular direction by other people for their purposes, they could recognize for themselves what was best for them, where was their real genius and their real joy, so they could pursue that.
Well, and sometimes people have a difficult planet in their chart. Maybe it's not a very strong planet. Maybe it's not in rulership, or it's in detriment, or any of these things that make it challenging, or it's in a hard aspect to another personal planet, and it just makes them hard to use that energy effectively, or the way that you would think that that planet should work in somebody's chart. And then you realize when you get older, or you have the help of an astrologer to point out to you that you can live your life through a filter of whatever planet you choose. So if your Mercury leaves you being misunderstood an awful lot, you can live your life more through your Mars, or express yourself through your Venus, artistically maybe, so that people would have an easier time of understanding you. And so there's a lot of things that you have an understanding of how astrology works, and how the calendar tells you what the current influences are on you now. And so maybe it's a matter of timing. You find the right time to make changes, or to make new decisions based on the calendar.
Exactly.
We hope you enjoyed spending a few astrological moments with Ralph and Lonnie D'Amicus. Tune in again next time to Planetary.